All right, folks. Today we have Scott Riley as our guest. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Dr. John, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for coming so much. Appreciate your time here. But first, let's tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey.
Well, I'm just a really ordinary guy who happens to have lived through some pretty extraordinary circumstances. And I've gone over the last couple of years from being 100 pounds heavier than you see me today and suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which is a chronic autoimmune condition, to being drug and symptom free for, like I say, over a couple of years now. And I've learned a lot of important lessons along the way, and I'm just really keen to share that message and with as many people as possible, because really a couple of years ago I had to work out a lot of things for myself. There wasn't really one specific area I felt like I could go to learn a lot about alternative health stuff. I had to search the internet far and wide, and I want to bring a lot of the good stuff that I've learned together and hopefully create a community so that not only can you learn about this stuff, but you can connect with other people that can support you and keep you accountable if you want to start looking at eating better, staying hydrated, and some of the other topics that I like to focus on.
Certainly. Well, I mean, you've been through the challenges yourself. That's why you're motivated to help other people to get through that hump, right?
Yeah, very much so. It's actually, part of my story was traveling to South America, to Peru, to take part in a plant medicine ceremony, or quite a few plant medicine ceremonies. I was treated with ayahuasca and huachuma, which is the Chavin name for the San Pedro cactus. And as part of one of my huachuma masadas, like the ceremony you go through there, I really made a promise to spread this message of health to other people, because by the time in my story that I got out to Peru, I was already kind of feeling physically a lot better. And I put a lot of my health down to the intention to even go out to South America and take part in these plant medicine ceremonies. But to get that far, then it was really important for me to spread that message further beyond myself. It's not enough to have this, I guess, nothing short of a miracle happen to myself. It's important to spread that further.
Right. So basically, there was a self-transformation first where you decided, okay, well, I have to change myself. And then you went down to South America, and the message you got was, I have to spread the message. Not only I have to help myself, I have to help others. Is that kind of how it went?
Very much so, yeah. It's essentially to be the medicine in the world. So really to take a step back from that, I'd been suffering from rheumatoid arthritis since I was 23. I got diagnosed. I was pretty miserable. I was depressed throughout all my teens, and I was essentially not living life. I was working all the time. I didn't really have much of a social life, and I guess my body kind of knew something was wrong and wanted to defend itself. But what happens if the problem is yourself? Your body starts attacking itself. So that's what, for anyone who's listening to this and doesn't know, rheumatoid arthritis is essentially an immune system problem where your body starts attacking your own joints mostly. So I kind of feel in hindsight that my body was attacking myself because I was really my own worst enemy. I just wasn't living life, and really it provided a motivation to make a radical change. It took me a good 4 years to start making that change. But I suffered for 4 years, tried a bunch of different pharmaceutical drugs, one of which worked for a short time, but nothing that was a permanent solution. And it only really addressed the symptoms rather than the main issue anyway. So after 4 years of really struggling on and off different pharmaceuticals, I got to a point where really the prospect of living another 40, 50 years with those conditions was almost unbearable, and I had to make some kind of change. And I stumbled across juice fasting. That was the very first thing that I came across. And It was actually at the same time, juice fasting, and I discovered ayahuasca, the plant medicine. So I decided to take both of those things on as a challenge at the same time. I booked my trip to Peru 6 months in advance, and from booking that trip, I started a 60-day juice fast. So I decided to go 2 months basically without eating any solid food, just denying my body all the, toxic processed food, stopped all the pharmaceutical drugs, and gave my body a chance to clean out and flood it full of micronutrients. And yeah, it was really successful. I lost a lot of the weight that I put on in the time that I was sick, and I continued to eat really, really clean, healthy food for the next 4 months, which took me basically right up to the journey to South America, which was really the next stage of my journey.
Before you dive into that, can you explain to our audience who has no idea what ayahuasca or plant medicine is? Just, that way they can kind of connect with the story.
Yeah, of course. So plant medicine is a kind of, it's found throughout all kind of cultures throughout the world, but the plant medicines that I'm talking about, specifically ayahuasca and huachuma, are indigenous to South America, and they are it's hard to put this in a really respectful way, but some people would call them hallucinogens or entheogens, that some people take for spiritual reasons, to access a deeper level of consciousness. And some people do for health reasons, like myself, to seek help with conditions like arthritis or Crohn's disease. Other people do it for symptoms like, or having conditions like depression or anxiety. It can even be helpful for addiction problems like alcoholism. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, especially on ayahuasca, and it's actually becoming a very popular thing at the minute, I believe, along like the west coast of America, that it's becoming a lot more well known.
Yes.
So people talk about the jungle creep, the medicine creeping out of the jungle. But it's been really positive experience for me, and I know there's mixed feelings on it, but what I would say is, if it's something that's interesting to you and something you feel that could benefit your life, really, really, really do your research. There's just know who you're dealing with, and go someplace with very, very trusted people. Talk to
Absolutely.
people. Get in-person reviews, and if that's a road you're going to go down, please do your research and be very careful.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. I don't think it's for everyone. I personally have tried it, and I think it can be very, very helpful tool if used properly in the right setting with the right people. For those of you who want to know more, I really recommend looking up Graham Hancock's take on that. He's super articulate on this subject matter, and he can just break it down like no other.
Yeah. So Graham was one of the people that I definitely listened to before going out to South America.
Certainly. So. Talk about ego annihilation and breaking things down, rebirth almost. But anyhow, yep, you can look that up, and I'll put that in the show note as well. So yep, on to your journey.
Yeah, so I went to South America. I spent 3 weeks there, went through 5 ayahuasca ceremonies and 3 huachuma masadas, which were completely transformative. And if you're interested in hearing about my specific experience about that, if you go to causewayliving.com and check out the journal, I've got a pretty in-depth a blog entry really about my experience with huachuma, and coming soon I'll write up my experience with ayahuasca as well to post there. So yeah, check that out. And yeah, ultimately the big takeaway from that was that I managed to find my health again without pharmaceutical drugs, and really I wanted to come back and spread the message of health, because I know there's a lot of people who were in the same situation as I was.
Certainly, that's powerful. Now talk to me about the birth of 6 weeks shift.
Yeah, well, 6 week shift is a online interactive group course that I've put together, and a bit of an exclusive here. There's actually going to be a live version of the course that I'm going to run in Belfast in Ireland, but that should be announced in the next week or so. But for those of you across the world, it's an interactive online course, and it looks at the 6 pillars of health. So drinking, eating, sleeping, breathing, moving, and thinking. And essentially, it's 6 simple steps to transform your life. I transformed my life using these methods. And yeah, if you sign up to the 6 week shift, you will be added to a small online group of 6 people. And you'll be given 6 weeks of tasks and challenges in a series of weekly videos and PDFs. And you'll be kept accountable with your group by the online or the online platform that you'll be added to. You'll be asked to give a daily check-in each day, and your other group members will be encouraged to help each other and support each other, give each other advice. And there'll also be a weekly interactive call as well, so you can stay accountable that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the big benefit as well is that at the end of the 6 weeks, you and your little tribe of 6 people will all be asked to vote for the person who contributed the most and gave their best, and they'll be eligible to win a free 1 week coaching as well. So they can take, beyond the 6 week shift, they can take some personal advice from me and progress even further than they have at the end of 6 week shift.
Certainly. And I think accountability is huge for any transformation. And just to have someone besides yourself to be accountable for, because we all know that we're the worst when it comes to ourselves, an appointment with ourselves to do things for ourselves, right? So I think that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's where I feel almost like I learned the hard way so that other people don't have to. I had to do all this stuff myself, which was difficult to say the least. As you just said, it's really hard to keep on, keep motivated that way. And I mean, I had an excellent motivation because I was so sick. Not everyone has that degree of personal motivation, fortunately, really. But in place of that, like if you can keep yourself accountable with other like-minded people who all have the same goal, that should make keeping on target with all these tasks a whole lot easier. Because really, I mean, being healthy is simple. It's not complex. It's a simple thing, but simple doesn't always mean easy. So to make it even easier, we can just use the power of human connection. And that's what I hope to do with the online platform I've built with Basecamp and the weekly calls.
Yeah, you have to leverage technology, as much as possible at this point in time. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. Using the internet, like even we're doing on this call now, to spread a message of happiness and health and strength. So
thanks to the
this
internet.
is a perfect example.
Yep. I want to ask you about mindfulness and breathing, because that is really part of my practice as well. And how do you integrate that into your program or even your life?
And mindfulness is a huge part of my life. I talked about 6 pillars of health before, and mindfulness really touches on all of them. So as part of the 6 week shift, for example, just to take one of the 6 areas that I look at in nutrition, we bring mindfulness into the kitchen by planning our meals ahead for each day, every day. So the day before, we know we're going to put in our body for however many meals you decide to choose, because everyone has different nutritional needs. But whatever your diet plan, it should really all be planned out the day before, so you know exactly what you're putting into your body. So staying mindful that way, and really it touches on everything. Mindfulness in the sense of traditional meditation as well. That's actually the first week of the 6 week shift focuses on meditation and mindfulness. Every week we look at one of the 6 pillars of health in more detail, but as we've actually talked about a little bit before, Dr. John, that mindfulness almost leads the way in the rest of the areas of health. So yeah, it's probably the most important factor. And breathing as well, especially. I think being mindful of your breath. Most people actually breathe very have a very shallow breath up high in their chest. And most people, I think, would say most people probably aren't even aware of diaphragm breathing and breathing with your stomach. So that's something I cover in detail in my course. We have a daily breathing practice as one of the foundation tasks. And then we look into a more advanced breathing practice on week 4, I believe, which is something that you can carry on beyond the 6 weeks and just integrate it as a part of your ongoing life. And that's really the biggest part of the 6-week shift. Is it's not about ticking boxes and, like certain challenges. It's really more about building good habits over 6 weeks that you can carry on, for the rest of your life. And even beyond, like, habits actually doesn't even do it justice, because really it's the reason behind the habits is, for me, that life just runs on momentum. And a big thing to if when life runs on momentum, sometimes people don't even know where to start to even begin to generate momentum. But for me, it's quite simple. It's the small things where we actually have control over. So, like I touched on before, we can all choose to drink, eat, breathe, sleep, move, and think a little bit better. And if we can take control of those small things and be positive in those areas, it can create momentum to change your life in ways that you can't probably even imagine at this stage.
Yeah, completely agree. That kind of reminded me of the interview I listened to recently, which was with Dandapani, I think the Hindu priest, and he said, don't even worry about enlightenment or meditation or anything. Just make your bed every morning. Make your bed, right? And a simple task like that trains your brain to complete the task, put a completion to what you started, and over time that develops into willpower to really apply that into every other aspect, like putting the dishes away after you eat, or completing a project, or go out for a run because you already made a promise to yourself to do so.
Exactly, just that increasing momentum, and that's really what I use as the motto for Causeway Living: small steps to giant living. So if you focus on the small things, the big things really start to take care of themselves, I feel.
So Scott, you mentioned the 6 pillars of health earlier. Would you mind kind of just dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. More than happy to, John. I feel like for me, in my transformation, I discovered 6 pillars of health that were really important. And those are drinking, eating, sleeping, breathing, moving, and thinking. And maybe I can touch on each one of those now with a small bit of practical advice that people can take away. Or if people are interested, I'm also in the middle of releasing a series of 1-minute videos, 60-second shifts over the next 6 weeks before the course.
That's cool.
So follow me on social media for that. But if you want the short form now, and let's start with drinking. It's basically drinking enough water each day, which is really straightforward and simple. I actually have a small calculation which is useful. It is taking your body mass in kilograms and multiplying that by 0.033, and you have your answer in liters, how much water you need each day. Obviously adjust upwards if you live in a warm climate or you're doing a lot of strenuous exercise. On the nutrition front, we have mindfulness and bringing mindfulness into the kitchen. So planning your meals ahead for each day, which can save you reaching for something unhealthy if you get to the point where you're really hungry and desperate for something to eat quickly. If you have your meal plan prepared for the day ahead, then you're much less likely to plan ahead something that doesn't fit in with your goals. So whenever you're making your meal plan, keep in mind what your kind of goal is, and that way you can avoid some bad decisions. The next one we have is sleeping. And a big part of that for me is the digital detox before sleep. A big thing at the minute a lot of people are talking about is the damage blue light does from screens and TVs, in stopping our production of the sleep hormone. No, pardon me, stopping our production of the sleep hormone. And if we can go an hour before bedtime without phones, without laptops and TVs, it's really beneficial to getting a good night's sleep.
Right, and that's what let me interject for a second. I
Of course.
do recommend people, when they ask me for sleep advice, I give them the acronym USLEEP, USLEEP. The first one is unplug 1 hour before bed, just exactly what you mentioned there. But it's so important just to kind of get our mind in the state of relaxation instead of consuming information and processing it, because that would be you consuming information and processing it. That's an alert state. You engage in thoughts, and it could mean more stress. You're not priming your body to rest. When you unplug, you really I think what we do is we eliminate all the potential thoughts creation, so we really allow the mind to settle before bed, which is so important. So
yeah, I agree. And also the chance to like integrate the day's lessons almost, if we're constantly consuming and all the way up to the evening where we're about to go to sleep, we don't really give our mind a little bit of time to process just everything we've dealt with throughout the day. So
that's important.
Like you said, having some time for your mind to rest and wind down and get away from blue light at that stage at the end of the day, which affects your hormones essentially and stops you getting into a good sleep pattern.
Absolutely.
So to move on to the next one, breathing, and something we also touched on, diaphragm breathing. We talked about before. That's something that people can research online, learning to breathe with their stomach and breathe deeply. And there's much, much deeper practices to go into in breathing, but that's a really good foundation. And moving, the very obvious one is to do a bit of exercise, do a little bit of movement each day, and balancing working, going to the gym and working out with something I like to call working in, which is, the like stretching or yoga and, creating energy instead of expending it with, running or lifting heavy weights to find a bit more balance there. And last but not least, thinking. So mindfulness, meditation, a small 10-minute practice of meditation each day is massive. And, there's plenty of free apps you can download out there to, start on regular meditation practice. But, eventually in your own time, you'll probably find, you find your own methods and what works best for you. And yeah, it's a small bit of practical advice to take away from the podcast, and maybe start making that shift yourself before joining up to the 6-week shift.
Definitely. And thinking is huge as far as meditation. To me, that's a time that you actually invest in yourself. We invest so much in other people's, in other things, in sports, recreational activities, which is great, right? If you enjoy it, absolutely go for it. But we're so disconnected. We don't even have 10 minutes to get to know ourselves. If, for example, I wanted to know you, Scott, I would say, hey, Scott, let's go get some coffee. And we actually go to the coffee bar and chat, and over time we get to know each other. We have deeper conversations. But we don't even have that 10 minutes for ourselves most of the time. We just start, wake up, and we go. And then at the end of the day, we just go to sleep, which is, to me, is a very disconnected pattern to have. And it could be dangerous because we can just go into this autopilot mode and not realizing or not integrating and reflecting upon life, really. So.
Yeah, and the really interesting thing for me in my experience is whenever I'm really busy, for whatever reason, meditation seems to be the first thing that falls out of my daily routine, which is really strange because it should be the first thing that you should be doing when you're stressed and too busy. But I guess that's where what we talked about with accountability and the power of human connection. If you're meditating with a group of other people, or there's other people out there that have a meditation daily practice, then you can all keep each other on track and make sure you don't slip when at times life is going to get busy, and other people can be really, really important to help make you prioritize the right things in those moments. So yeah, that's again another part where the 6-week shift really comes in, and connecting with a small group of other people who are undertaking the same positive tasks.
Let me ask you this, Scott. How do you deal with stress in your life?
A big one for me is breathing. That's my first thing to jump to whenever I'm stressed. I use the method described by Wim Hof, the breathing method, which, again, this is something I can describe here. It's a series of 30 or to 40 deep breaths, fully in and letting it go, fully in and letting it go. And on the last exhalation, hold your breath. And once you feel the need to breathe in again, just bring that in for 10 to 15 seconds and hold it in. And then really what I've just described there is one repetition. So basically repeat that three to 5 times. 3 is probably enough if you're starting out. So the 30 breaths, the holding your breath on the final exhalation, and breathe in for 10 to 15 seconds. And yeah, repeat that 2 or 3 times. And I feel that has a massive shift on, my body and my mind. Just brings a lot of clarity. And it works basically by like giving you, this increase in adrenaline, and can basically give you a short fix to deal with some outside stress. So for me, stress, the first pillar I jump to is breathing.
Great. What does Causeway Living mean? How'd you came about that name? Just curious.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit of an homage to where I come from. On the north coast of Ireland, there's a UNESCO World Heritage Site called the Giant's Causeway, and it's actually a really interesting place. It's these 6. You can search it online. The Giant's Causeway. It's a natural rock formation of these big hexagonal rocks that come out of the earth. So it leans a lot into the whole 6 pillars of health, and it makes a lot more sense whenever you see the Giant's Causeway, the whole visual side of Causeway living. And it's an interesting place. It's called the Giant's Causeway because there's this old Irish myth that there was an Irish giant and a Scottish giant, and the Irish giant wanted to build a bridge over to Scotland to challenge the Scottish giant to a fight. But whenever he actually got over there, it turns out the Scottish giant was much, much bigger than the Irish one. So he ran back home, and the Scottish giant followed after, knowing that there's an Irish giant now and there's a path. And the Irish giant, who was called Finn, got into his baby's like basket or crib. And whenever the Scottish giant burst through the door, and he said to his wife, "Where's Finn, the Irish giant? I want to challenge him to a fight." His wife turned around and said, "Oh, he's away out collecting wood, but I'm just minding after the baby here." And he saw Finn, dressed as a baby in the crib. He said, "Oh my God, if this giant's baby is this size, he must be massive." So he ran back over to Scotland, destroyed the path on the way, and that's what left the Giant's Causeway left on Ireland. So it's a really special place, and it's got a cool story. So I would encourage anyone who comes to Ireland to check it out. But it's a special place for me, and I
just looked it up online right now, and it's super cool looking stone formation. Are those natural?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's all natural. It comes from volcanic activity. If you choose not to believe the giant story, but. Yeah, it's a really cool place, and you can check out on I think across social media. If you go to all my social media stuff, by the way, it's just /Causeway Living. But on Facebook and Instagram, you can see some pictures I posted up there recently doing some yoga stuff up at the Giant's Causeway, which was cool. So
very cool.
Yeah, that's the origin story pretty much.
I want to ask you about the Iceman.
Wim Hof.
Yes.
Yeah, that's another big part of my story that I hadn't actually fully touched on yet. I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about Wim. And only a couple of months ago, I was fortunate enough to meet Wim. He's a really, really cool guy, very, very gracious. And when I had a chance to tell him my story, he jumped out of his chair and, said, "You're a warrior, man," and threw his arms around me.
That's awesome.
It's really, really cool. So, Yeah, he's an awesome guy, and for those who don't know, I would really, really recommend doing a bit of research on Wim Hof, and he goes more deeply into the breath work than I do probably, and that's his main message, and also cold training, cold exposure training, which I'm really into as well. And that isn't actually part of the 6-week shift. It's something I've got in mind at a later stage. The 6-week shift at some stage in the future is going to have a more advanced 6-week course that will link up back to back, so you can do 12 weeks. But part of that is going to be cold exposure training, and probably going more deeply into the breathing practices, more similar to the Wim Hof method. But it's his message is very, very similar to mine, very aligned with just being happier, healthier, and stronger in your body.
Yeah. Did you train with him as far as breathing technique?
When not directly with him, my meeting with Wim was actually for a recording of another podcast. A good friend of mine, Xavier, runs the Human Experience podcast, and we were spending time together in LA whenever he was going to do the Wim Hof interview, and he knew I'd done the 10-week online Wim Hof course, so invited me along to meet him. And I think he knew that I would like to meet Wim, and he maybe had a sense that Wim would get a kick out of hearing that the Wim Hof method was a big part of my journey back to health, because that's what that guy lives for. So
yeah, certainly.
So that was a really cool experience.
I started his little online training as well, so I developed the cold shower, and I thought that was to me life-changing for a while. I stopped recently, but I was doing it for 11 months, which was very interesting, to say at least.
I think
beneficial.
For me, very, very beneficial, and probably more so than I even realized. Whenever I took on the Wim Hof method, I probably underestimated how much would be involved in it. There's like maybe an hour's practice each day by the time you do the breathing and stretching and the cold shower. But I also underestimated the benefits. I noticed a massive difference in my cardiovascular fitness. I became a lot fitter. I became stronger through doing some of the stretches and yoga postures. And probably most important of all is the people I've met through doing the Wim Hof method. That's been probably the most life-changing thing for me. The community, the people that are drawn to Wim and his method are just the most special people you'll ever meet. And they were actually a big part of encouraging me to even create Causeway Living in the first place.
Right. What's next? Ultimately, you started Causeway Living, now 6-week shift. What's your ultimate vision of all this? Like, why do all this?
Well, truthfully, whenever I started Causeway Living, it was more with the idea of coaching people one-on-one who were in a similar position that I was, wanted some tips and advice to improve their lifestyle factors and feel healthier, happier, and stronger. But at some stage, I realized that I wanted to be more effective in spreading this message further and quicker, and that's when the idea of 6-week shift came along, that I could create lots of small groups to get this message out there as quickly as possible. And beyond that, really, as I kind of touched on before, more advanced courses for people who want to go deeper. But ultimately, I want to be able to train up other Causeway coaches, if that makes sense. Other people who can take these methods and teach others, so that it's not dependent on me. It's just a series of practices that other people can use to spread far and wide, take it into different languages, run their own online courses, and take care of the calls themselves. So that's the bigger picture, to have a series of Causeway coaches to go around the world spreading this message of wellness and happiness and strength.
Awesome. Very cool. I love it, man. Love it.
Thanks.
So I asked this to a lot of our guests. What's your definition of wellness?
It's a really good question. I think it's really hard to look past what the guy we were just talking about, what Wim Hof says. Happiness, health, and strength in your body, I think, is a really good way of encapsulating what wellness is. But Also, I would go as far to say is it's quite unique to each person. I think wellness can mean a different thing to every individual. And, if we're talking about happiness, health, and strength in your body, strength to one person is very different to being strong for another person. So, yeah, I think everyone's got to find their own individual feeling of what wellness is, but I don't think you can go too far wrong as a short answer to look at what WIM promotes in happiness, health, and strength.
Lovely. So, where are you online, and where can people learn more about you?
So if you go to causewayliving.com, you can find out more about me and about the 6-week shift on there. If you want to jump straight into the 6-week shift, there's 6weekshift.com. That'll just take you directly to the course site. And all the social media platforms are just /Causeway Living. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all /Causeway Living. And yeah, you guys can stay in touch there. You can sign up for the weekly newsletter. And at the minute, actually, if you go to 6weekshift.com, if you sign up to the newsletter, enter your name and email address, I'm actually giving away the PDF from the first week for free. So people can get a lot of really, really good information on there on tips for those 6 pillars of health we talked about before. But if you want to commit fully and integrate the human connection part that we talked about, then you can sign up for the full course, get the full series of PDFs and videos, and it starts on January 2nd. That's something very important that I probably should have said before now. But yeah, you've still got plenty of time to sign up, and starting January 2nd, we'll get you added to a small base camp group with me. Actually, that's another part I should mention, that part of your group of 6 people, I'll be in your group. So it'll be you who signs up, me, and 4 randomly selected other people who've signed up for the same course. So yeah, check me out online, and yeah, I hope to see you take part in one of the courses soon.
Great, Scott. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think you really connected with a lot of people today with your story and how you transform yourself and your message of spreading health and wellness into all areas of the globe, which is so important. That's why we do this podcast. That's how we got connected somehow, somewhere online, and we were able
it's meant to be.
Exactly. So yeah, guys, please check it out. All the show notes will have all the links to Scott's social media and website, so you can get that free PDF, understand what 6 weeks shift really is and how it can benefit you. So if you're stuck, if you're in a stress, if you've been dealing with chronic conditions and really want to change and transform, and his program starts on January 2nd, so it'll be a great New Year's resolution, and Scott will make sure you don't fall off the wagon this time. So
perfect.
All right, well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks again, Dr. John. Awesome.